Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our newest and today's EBnet in the Moment webinar. I can see many of you have already figured out how the chat works, so we'll deal with that just now. But we're looking forward to having a productive morning and a good discussion with our administrators who we will be chatting to about their readiness for two-part. Okay, so let's get into it. Thank you very much to Old Mutual for their sponsorship for today. There will be some handouts that we'll give out during the session, but what I really want to do is take a moment to thank all of you for joining us. On the line, we have a number of advisors. We obviously have our sponsors, and there are a number of trustees from a couple of funds, or more than a couple of funds, who I'd like to welcome, specifically Telkom, the GEPF, welcome, Ultron, Bidvest, Joburg, De Beers, PPC, Germiston Municipal, Media 24, welcome, Tourism, Hospitality and Catering, Vodacom, NFMW, Satawu, First Rand, the Fishini Group, welcome, Mercedes, let's not talk Formula One, the CSIR, Eskom Pension and Provident Fund, who are one of our panelists, thank you and welcome, the Adjudicator's Office, Rand Mutual Assurance, Robert Bosch, Life Healthcare, the PIC, and many of the country's largest administrators, together with ESCO Employees Provident Fund. So welcome, everybody. You can see there's quite a diverse scattering amongst the audience. Right, and there's the handout. You're welcome to go and have a look at it. If you need some help with your two-pot, you can find out some more stuff there. Okay, so let's deal with some of the housekeeping issues. You can see many of you have already started using the chat bar, but you're welcome to have a chat there. You will see that to this morning's session, we've got 10 panelists waiting to come on stage. We've broken it down into two groups, really looking for or looking at two specific areas of two-part readiness. So the first group will be on the stage, we'll call them on just now, and they will be looking at the administration side and the systems and the claims, and the second group will be looking at the communication and the education around two-part. While the 5 speakers are on the stage, the 5 other speakers in group 2 will be in the audience. So you are welcome to type your questions as the session is unfolding. I'm looking forward to some good questions. Don't feel scared to answer or to ask any of the questions you might have. I'm going to try and do some of those for you, but I'm going to need some help. So feel free to participate. Those who are on stage will answer your questions, and those who are in the audience are welcome to type, and we'll be answering your questions as well. So that deals with the two groups. And the last and probably the most important point for most of you on the call is that this session will be submitted for CPD verification. And I need to remind you that you have to stay for the full session. We will be applying for CPD hours, and we will be in touch with you once you get that, and in terms of that process. So that's the housekeeping. I think I've hit everything. And yes, so without any further delay, let's get into it. I'm looking forward to this. So in 24 days' time, our industry changes forever. So we've had big changes like this before, but nothing quite on this kind of scale. So we've got changes to processes, we've got changes to rules, to investments, to communication, to personal financial planning issues, and nothing and no one escapes the impact of two-part. And I think that's where we've all been, had our eyes wide open. This affects every single person who either works on a retirement fund or has a retirement fund. Yesterday, I communicated with the Financial Services Conduct Authority, Financial Sector Conduct Authority. They told me that they've got 97% of the rule amendments have been submitted. Okay, so they are busy. We know of some of the administrators have already started getting the approvals on their umbrella funds. So we know that the runway is busy being cleared now, and all obstacles seem to be being removed for the implementation of this. And so now the real question is, are we ready? And to answer some of those questions, I'm going to welcome on stage Natasha Hagat-Henshi, who's the Consulting Actuary and Director at NMG Benefits. Welcome, Natasha. Johan Prinsloo, the Head of Retirement Fund Administration at Sanlam Corporate. Welcome, Johan. Mashupia Cladi, Senior Specialist Corporate Consulting at Liberty. Nice to see you again, Mash. Helen Littlewood, consulting head for KZN at Signia, and Sia Sangakashi, executive member solutions at Momentum Corporate. Okay, so we're going to wait a little bit, or we'll wait for Helen to join us. But these are our panelists for this first half of the session. And like I mentioned before, this first half, we're really we're gonna look at the admin readiness of the industry. And that's not to say that those who are on the screen represent the industry. We do have others, as I say, in the chat, and you're welcome to engage with them. But we picked these 5 willing victims to start our session with me. So I'm gonna dive right in, and I encourage everybody on the chat to give me some indication around how many claims they think are going to be submitted. And I know we ran a poll on this on EBnet leading up to this webinar, and we had indications from trustees that they were expecting about 50% of members, or more than 50% of members, in fact, to claim. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to bat a question to Johan, if I may, and get the session started. Johan, what is Sanlam's views around claims and what we can expect on Monday, the 2nd of September?
Hello, Nat, and good morning to everyone participating in this webinar. So in the Sanlam corporate environment, that's mainly our occupational retirement funds. We've got about 500,000 members. What we did then was to separate out those members with a fund credit of 20,000 Rand and more, because we know the minimum withdrawal from the emergency savings pot is 2,000, and there are over 300,000 eligible members in the Sanlam corporate environment. At a 50% withdrawal rate, you're looking at close to 150 withdrawals, 150,000, sorry. And on average, that is about 12,000 per month. And if you take a higher bracket of 80%, it jumps to 240,000 for a year on an average of 20,000 a month. We also know that there will be a spike between September and probably up until the end of November, and then probably once again in the new tax year. At beginning of March, April, you'll see another spike. So the numbers are significant, and that's why from a Sanlam perspective, we've opted for a digital and as automated process in order to accommodate all the volumes.
Johan, I wonder if I can just delve into that a little bit more. How many more claims is that than your usual experience?
So it's, on average, we have about 5,000 withdrawals per month. So that is now resignations, retrenchments, retirements. So if you just take the 50% mark in the monthly average, it's double. So it's 10,000 on top of the 5,000 we usually deal with in the day-to-day administration. So it is significant.
Wow. See, I see you nodding. From Momentum's point of view, are you experiencing the same things?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, let me say morning to everyone. Thanks, Natalie, for the invite to join this interesting and very needed discussion. Definitely from a Momentum perspective, similar trends. We anticipate about 42% of our members will withdraw, especially in September. So we've really been, looking at upskilling our client service areas. We've actually had to recruit, for our servicing areas to cater for the demand. So also looking at, a double an increase in the claims that we're expecting during this period. We are obviously going to be monitoring it quite closely. It is a new territory for all of us. So, as hopefully the September demand unpacks over the period, we do anticipate that it will slow down closer to the end of this year. But definitely going very closely. Yeah.
Natasha, NMG, from your side.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we're thinking we're going to have about a 5-fold increase in claims. We're obviously slightly smaller than some of our fellow panelists, but yeah, we pay about 12,000 claims, and we think we're probably going to pay about 60,000. And that's why we've also really gone digital on this process, and really kind of focused on and we're using a chat WhatsApp bot facility, which is not just an educational, and we literally you'll go onto the WhatsApp and you will be able to claim through the claim straight through processing using that WhatsApp functionality, which we really think will help streamline our process and make those claim volumes much easier for us to manage.
Okay, so definitely a technology focus there for NMG.
Absolutely,
On Liberty,
yes.
On Liberty's side, Mashuphi, do you have your thoughts around what kind of claims volumes you can be expecting?
Thanks, Natalie, and morning to everyone. Yeah, I think similar to the other administrators, so we're expecting around 70% of our membership base who would be eligible to make a claim as at 1 September. So that's about 200,000 claims per tax year. And in terms of volumes from the normal claims that we receive, that goes about to double the volume size of the claims that we receive. So it's quite going to be a mammoth task to get some of these claims through. And I think Johanna spoke about the spike that we're going to see in the beginning. It almost reminds me of if you think about back in COVID when everyone was panic buying to try and get supplies and toilet paper and all of those things. So we're the cashiers now at the back end trying to service these people. And then once the spike goes through, probably we'll see, a little bit downward trend in some of those claims, yeah. But it's going to be quite a task, yeah.
Helen, Signia, your thoughts around readiness from Signia's point of view and around your experience about what other big umbrellas or other big administrators are saying.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And if I just have a look at the number of members that have got values less than 2,000, there's about a third of our members that have got are going to have savings pot balances of less than 2,000, so won't be able to make any claims at all. And then it's a third, like between 2,000 and 10,000, and then over 10,000. And same as what everybody else has said, we're going to experience probably double the amounts of claims that we usually process. We have been doing system simulations, and we've simulated 50,000 claims being processed, and we haven't had any system problems, so we don't anticipate any problems on the day or on the days, after the system is opened.
It's interesting because when we had our one session the other day, we were talking about how none of us have ever experienced this before. So it's a lot of what we're chatting about today is in the theoretical world of hope. Let's just call it that. But yeah, I guess we can be as prepared as we can be. And I think yeah, the administrators have a lot to cope with. The one question that I always think about when I think about two-pot and what everybody seems to agree as being double the claims, let's just call it that, is fraud and security and identity verification type stuff. And Natasha, I'm gonna bat this one to you because you're using a WhatsApp kind of claims process and protocol. How are you going to go about verifying identities of people to prevent fraudulent claims?
Thank you. Yeah, so we're obviously looking at what's the data that we've got on system, and we're using a three-phase verification. We'll need your ID number, we will need your SARS reference number, and you will need your employee number to be able to get through into the chat. And so that we think is a reasonably good. And then ultimately the fourth verification is even once you've put, yes, you want to proceed. There's a bank verification, so that bank account number ties back to that person's name and ID number. So we think we secure on that front.
There's a lot of nods around the panel. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add to that as well, Natalie. So from a momentum perspective, we are also encouraging our members to use digital platforms. So we also have a WhatsApp. So it's an existing WhatsApp platform. So basically from a, testing, fraud, cybersecurity perspective, so it's undergone, a lot of testing. So it's not a new platform. It's been tried and tested. So we are encouraging WhatsApp. However, we will also make, a manual process available. So physical forms, because we do also recognize that not everyone will have access to WhatsApp. To WhatsApp. So it is going to be slightly more expensive to process, via the manual route. So we do encourage our members to really use the WhatsApp platform. We've also empowered our HR and staff employers to use the employer portal in assisting their members, submit the claims. However, members can also, use a WhatsApp platform. There's a walk-in option available. There's also email. But it is encouraged that they use, the WhatsApp platform. From a security perspective, there's 4 data points, similar to what has been shared by Natasha. So essentially, ID verification or passport, bank verification, making sure that your tax number is the correct one. So we don't have, a case where members can have 2 numbers in the system. So that's, that'll give us a flag, or it'll fail the claims if you insert an incorrect tax number, or, for example, if you put 2 claims within one tax year, it does, a fraud activity.
Wow. Here's an interesting question that I'm actually going to profile from Chris. Thanks, Chris. In a perfect world, every member has access to digital comms like WhatsApp, email, websites, etc. And this was another question I was going to ask. What about the offline population, and how are we getting to them? And I'm going to bat this to Mash, because I think he's got a fair amount of claims to service on the day and the following days after implementation. What are you doing for the people who don't have the technology?
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks for the question, Chris. I think obviously, our preferred channel to manage these claims would be the digital platform that we'll have available to see the claims through. It's a much quicker, more efficient platform to get the claims through. We also have the manual processing of claims where members would fill in the manual form. I think the biggest challenge with the 2 claims would be the correct information. Firstly, with the digital one, as my other colleagues have mentioned, as it takes the member through the process, you'd need to have the verification as you go along. So bank verification, all the AML checks, tax numbers. So if you happen to have an incorrect information, it might hinder the process from, going through. And then that delays the claim from, getting finalized. Similar to the manual claim form, which still in any event need the correct information. And I think with the manual claim, the conflict between the 2 is that with the manual one, it takes a little bit longer to process. So the member would only see their money, on a turnaround time of a little bit longer than the digital platform, but we'll still make that option available to our members. And for the other guys, just to add on that, we've also made 2-part videos available, and we're also soon going to be releasing one on how to claim through our digital platform, as well as the manual claim form. And that will be available to members in 4 different languages. So that's how we try and bridge that gap for the other members that might not be as tech savvy or have access to the technology that you need for the digital claim process.
While we're talking digital claims, Johan, I was actually going to ask you, I'm going to come to you now. I've got a very interesting question from Ronald. Thanks for interacting with us, Ronald. Are we expecting claims to come via digital or handwritten formats? And I suspect Johan's answer is going to be both, but let me not take the words out of his mouth. Johan.
So, what I realized during the course of running with this project is the whole concept of digital literacy amongst our members. And if you look at the future of where we're heading from a financial services industry, the introduction of AI, in the end of the day, almost everything, all services is going to be rendered digitally Two-Pot is just now surfacing this issue of digital literacy because, as you've heard, most service providers prefer that route. It is far more cheaper, more efficient. It manages the fraud risk. We know if we get manual claims, we've seen with unclaimed benefits, there's a hell of a lot of fraud committed on manual claims. And that's why we want to steer as far as possible away from manual claim submissions. So you do expect a mixed batch, but we are relying more heavily on making an effort to train members to get them to become digitally literate in order that they can adopt our digital solutions. I think that is probably a topic for a whole webinar for a day, yes, about the level of digital literacy and also what is the factual situation in South Africa. I think we all anecdotally assume that it's quite a large percentage of members that's not digitally literate, but if you go and pull the stats, then you may see a different picture. Thanks.
Certainly if you pull the stats on my teenagers, they seem very digitally, what's the word? Involved.
Well, it's my word. I call it digital literacy. It's probably been coined by someone before, but I do think that is a very, very specific enabler and thing that we as an industry probably haven't looked as closely to as we could have. And Two-Pot is, as I'm saying, just now surfacing that need for members to become digitally literate.
I mean, how many of your claim forms that you receive generally are digital, and how many are kind of handwritten, either walked in or brought or emailed in handwritten format?
So look, the claim forms is submitted by the employers, and about 90% of that is digital in one shape or the other. We get very few manual forms, but we had a big drive to get employers to adopt our digital solutions. I guess the next point is to say, but remember, where you can submit a claim, how are we going to empower you to do it digitally instead of on a manual way?
My next question is for Helen at Signia. Helen, it's the big question that is one of the most common in the chat bar, and forgive if I'm putting you on the spot here. SARS. What are the messages coming out of the SARS office in terms of being ready for all the tax directives?
Well, that's quite a good one, and it's quite a simple one for me to answer. So there was an article that came out yesterday, and SARS say they're ready. So we are very happy with that. And but again, this is new to everybody, and it's new to SARS as well. And I think the volumes that are going to come through are going to be, that's going to be trial and error, I think.
Sure. Natasha, from NMG's side, we're expecting a lot of these claims and SARS claims they to be ready. I don't know if we saw this morning on EBnet the update of rule amendments that are being registered and have been submitted. So the runway is really clearing. The issue that is always kind of flummoxes me is, how do we check whether members have divorce or maintenance agreements against their records? Is that not going to cause some complications and some disappointments?
Yes, it will. But we have taken the approach that we are going to rely on what is on the system. So in other words, we will flag what's on the system. If we know about a divorce, if we know about the maintenance orders, those will be flagged, and we've tightened up our processes around that. But we're not going to stop the process. If a claim comes through, if there's a flag, the claim will be stopped, but we're not going to try and verify that. It's just too complicated, and we'll just delay every claim. And ultimately, there are not that many divorce, pending claims, issues, in proportion to the total number of claims. And so we felt we would rather, run that risk, as it were.
So that's
from your side? Oh, sorry, Helen.
Yeah, so from Signia's side, what we've done is we've actually put a little section onto the withdrawal claim form. Do you have any pending divorce claims or maintenance claims? So the member actually has to tick a box. So if they lie on that, They've told us they don't have, and if they have, then we'll deal with it as it comes.
We're actually doing the same. So we are asking, but we're not going to stop it if they lie, you know, and it's not flagged, then it'll go through ultimately. Yeah.
Liberty side, Mash, any thoughts on the claims against benefits?
Yeah, thanks. I think, obviously the members' records would be flagged for divorce deductions, but I think important to note from a SAST perspective and from a member expectation perspective as well, what we've been trying to just drive the message across to members is that, you know, you get the tax deduction at your marginal rate, and over and above that, there's this whole IT88 story that SAST might impose on that deduction. So we're really trying to encourage members to you know, have a look at their retirement savings values before they make that decision to withdraw. That whole panic buying story that I spoke about earlier on, that we might see in the first couple of days, we're trying to encourage members as best as we can, because there are those other implications around your tax affairs that might, you know, the expectation might not be what the member expects to receive in their bank account at the end of the day. So that's quite an important one for members to note as well.
Yeah,
Our next, yes, please, Sia, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add on that in terms of encouraging members to preserve. So, you know, our approach has also been, I think there's been a lot of emphasis on the savings component, but not as much emphasis on the retirement component and the need for South Africans, you know, to save for retirement. So whilst we do, you know, appreciate that there might be an emergency need, and that's the reason why the savings component is being made available, we're really trying to encourage our members, you know, to view their retirement, the 3 pots or 2 pots, as one retirement plan. As, you know, those savings when it's a financial emergency. Thanks.
Yeah, valid, and I guess it's a bit like housing loans. Nobody really questions what they're using it for, and it's an interesting one. I'm going to end our session because we're approaching the midway part of our webinar, unfortunately, and I'm going to end by giving each of you an opportunity to, in a very brief few sentences, kind of share what your biggest concerns are for Sunday, the 1st of September. Johan.
Helen, there's a couple, truth be told. We are a little bit worried about the scope changes that we're still seeing coming through from SARS. We know we're implementing on a draft bill, the Revenue Laws Amendment Bill 2024. I've seen in the week that now the seeding for your 55 plus members requirements have changed, and that really throws us off course. So scope changes is one of my biggest concerns. And then I'm sure, as we all know and have discussed, the numbers, systems being robust enough, our staff being able to handle all the volumes and not really knowing what is coming down the line is probably what concerns me the most. Thanks.
Natasha, you're welcome. Natasha from NMG side.
Yes, also a couple of concerns, and mine is really around those people. You know, we've all mentioned 25 to 35% of our membership are below that threshold. So a lot of disappointment out there, not understanding that. A lot of disappointment about the ID88s and those unseen taxes. You know, and then I think, it is really actually goes to the understanding that, you know, I think there's a bit of a use it or lose it mentality. I was confronted in a retail store the other day, and they said, "Oh, we're worried we have to take our money quickly." It's like, no, you don't actually have to. You can wait. You don't have to use it. So I think that's potentially driving up volumes, is actually the lack of understanding around what people are going to be able to do and how they're going to be able to access their money. So I think that's the worry, is actually the educational worry. I think we really, from the systems point of view, it's just making sure people know what they need to do and when.
Helen, Signia's side, what are you most worried about? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. Pretty much the same as what everybody else is worried about, and just the sheer volumes. And I think the disinformation out there is also going to cause a lot of problems with people's expectations not being met in terms of the amounts of money that they're going to get out after the tax has been deducted, and the queries that are going to come through, and just the sheer volume of everything.
Matt, from Liberty side, biggest challenge and worry?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. I think there's quite a couple, but I think top of the list would be, that the message that members, the expectations on the other side. I think Natasha earlier on mentioned as well. The members need to realize, what actually will be in their bank account and what needs to happen for them to get that money. So a lot of reliance on employers to ensure that we have correct member details so that they can access the digital platform as efficiently as possible, and to see the claims process through as quick as possible, and just really just educate the members through our two-part videos, through all the information that we made available to members around two-part, around how to claim and all of the implications from a tax perspective as well. Yeah.
See, I see you nodding. For the last comments around claims and readiness challenges, do you have anything to add?
No, similar to what the industry colleagues have shared. The volumes, although we are prepared from an administration perspective, the initial volumes that are going to be coming through, is something that we're watching quite closely. What we're going to be doing is, when members call, we're going to be walking them through the WhatsApp process, so that as part of a change management, adoption as well, that they get used to using the WhatsApp. I think to what Johan mentioned earlier, the digital literacy part is basically what we also want to encourage and drive. But other than that,
lovely.
We'll see it on the 2nd of September.
Lovely. I'm going to thank our panelists, this group of panelists, and invite them to leave the stage, and hopefully you'll all remember which button that is. But thank you very much for your time. Please stay on the call. Feel free to interact in the chat. I see Natasha's been wonderfully multitasking there, but feel free to interact on the chat. And thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so while we are organizing and reshuffling some of our panelists, let me share with you a story, and the challenge that people are experiencing is interesting to me, and it leads beautifully into our second session on communication. Last week I was running a member education session around two-part and trying to share with people how the new legislation works. And while the session went relatively okay, and we can all come up with easy words for the jargon, I couldn't believe how much misinformation and how much misunderstanding there is. And one of the issues that really kind of struck me was literally 30 seconds after the session, people were walking out saying, I'm going to take all my money out the fund before these changes are happening. And that was curious to me. I kind of thought, sure, like 25 seconds ago, I've just told you, this money is safe, you can access it, you can do whatever. And yet people seem to have left that session with some of the wrong messaging. And so in that note and in that light, I would like to welcome our second group of panelists. Thank you. I'll introduce them quickly while they're all getting set up. We have Monique Klutter, who's the head of Group Retirement Solutions at Old Mutual. Belinda Sullivan, head Corporate Consulting Strategy at Alex Forbes. Subedra Reddy, Executive Head Actuarial Services at NBC. Welcome, Subedra. I can see you there. Guy Chennels, Chief Commercial Officer, Corporate and EB at Discovery. Welcome, Guy. And finally, we have Joey Sankar, who's the Executive Pension Administration at Eskom Pension and Provident Funds. And that's an interesting one because we have some defined benefit funds there represented by Joey. So I'm keen to hear his views around that. While Joey and Monique try and sort out their tech, let's jump right into it. Guy, I'll start with you. Discovery, around communications. What do you believe has been the toughest thing to kind of get right leading up to September?
Can I only pick one, Natalie?
Well, in deference to your colleagues on the panel, I mean, I would.
I think it actually segued quite nicely from the last panel group. This disinformation and trying to combat that is huge. You know, I had a lovely anecdote of someone at church overhearing someone else saying, "Oh, I'm going to bless everybody." Oh, wow. No, because my pension fund's paying out in September. You know? So they're just seeing this as like a tax rebate or something, the bonanza coming their way. And so trying to sort of work against that and provide helpful information has been a big focus for us. We put out a number of people put out a website. We put out a two-pot hub. And what we wanted to do there with the calculator we put in was to build into the calculator a little bit of what it actually is going to mean for you, so that people can contextualize, okay, this is how much I might be able to get, but this is what it means in terms of the extra months or years I'll need to work to make up for that, or the amount I should contribute back in. So just try, as you're helping people with the information they want, you're also giving them the information they need. But you asked what's the biggest challenge. It's very difficult getting through to people, as your little example gave as well. Actually getting people to comprehend what you're saying, as opposed to what they either hope is true or what they've heard, you know, from their friends, some sort of disinformation.
Belinda, from Alex Forbes's point of view, are you experiencing the same? And how are you overcoming some of these things?
Thanks, Natalie, and good morning, everyone. Very definitely. And I think the biggest part is making sure that members understand the implications and the impact of the choices that they make, and making sure that there is easy access to information, to learn about it, to understand what two-pot means in the context of 1 September, which is, in fact, merely the trigger date for change in our retirement landscape. And then understanding post 1 September, the decisions and the choices that they can make over their lifetime, how that will impact their outcomes in retirement. And I think something that someone said earlier in the earlier session is that, you know, it's not this sort of knee-jerk reaction, come 1 September, I must do something, and I have to do it now, else I don't get the opportunity in the future. It's something that people can use as part of their long-term financial planning, and ensuring that people get advice, have access to advice in order to make the choices that actually form part of a holistic financial plan. So as Guy said, Discovery has a hub. We've got the My Money Matters Toolkit, which is actually a general site for Joe public to be able to go on there and to learn about two-pot and actually financial planning as a whole, to really support the education aspect of it.
Subedra, I'm going to pick on you next. So we're all talking about these very technical terms in English, and understanding each other, I think, relatively well. I can remember hearing about two-pot for the first time and thinking, oh my word, I don't understand it. But, you know, yet we've arrived today and we can discuss and converse, you know, relatively comfortably. English, we're all talking English, but what about other languages that are out there and membership who don't perhaps speak English as their first language?
Yeah, I mean, in South Africa, many people don't speak English, but especially they don't understand concepts that are not in their mother tongue, you know. So I think it's very important to be able to communicate to people. But it's not just about sending a flyer that's been translated into X number of languages, you know. I think you need to be able to engage with the members in a language that they understand, you know. So they need to be able to ask questions and receive an answer in a language that they understand, you know. If you think about it, imagine going back to high school and having to do maths in Afrikaans, so having to do maths in Zulu, you know, if you're an English first language speaker. I mean, I'd be failing 100%, you know. So I mean, you know, put the poor members in the same situation. You know, they do need to be able to get an explanation of a very complicated concept. Let's be honest, two pots is not easy. It's not simple. Any legislative change is going to be difficult. But I mean, if you think about it, you have to figure out how much is available for you. I mean, just for seeding, you have to do a mathematical formula, 10% of this, subject to a limit of this, you know. You have to work out how much is going to go into your savings pot and your retirement pot, you know. Certain people can opt in, certain people will opt out. Then there's tax tables, marginal taxes applying, not withdrawal tax tables. So it's, you know, it's extremely complicated, you know. And I think that's also something that we must bear in mind whenever any sort of change is happening. The key is change needs to be simple, you know. You can't make change complicated for members. At the end of the day, if members don't buy in to something that's taking place, then you're going to get failure, you know. Whether this is a good change or a bad change, if members perceive this as bad, then this will fail, you know. So it's very important that, you know, members do get an explanation in a language that they're comfortable with and a language that they're familiar with. Certainly, we try to do that as much as possible at NEC. You know, we certainly try and engage members in their own language, and, you know, hopefully, you know, they will get the message. But certainly, in my experience, you know, the language is a major area. You know.
I'm going to thank Praveen, who's asked a question in the chat that I was actually going to ask of our colleagues there from the ESCOM defined benefit funds. So let's talk about communication for DB funds quickly. You know, there are still DB funds out there, believe it or not. There are probably some people on this call who don't even know what a DB fund is. But they do exist. Yeah. It's old like me, but they do exist. Complications for DB funds and communication. Joey.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you very much for the participation. I think many of the members have touched on the core components around the communication aspect of it. But, you know, a defined benefit fund, yes, a bit of a black sheep to the legislation, if you want to call it that, or a stepchild to the legislation. Many of the items were only finalized to the latter part of the discussions itself. But you would appreciate that, you know, dealing with, you know, just looking at, if you just look at the EPBF itself, you know, 200 billion rand of assets under management, 40,000 members, everybody's worried about performance, right? So that's becomes one of the critical components. So you generally start off with understanding that defined benefit formula, and you start understanding what, and then you dissect that further into commutation factors and utilization factors, and it just gets complicated. It's as simple as that. It gets very, very technical and gets very complicated. So for us as a defined benefit fund, we understanding that complication, the financial literacy components, before even jumping into any form of digital. The idea was to segment the organization from a membership point of view, understanding how the membership is built up at this point in time, the older, the younger, the newer, understanding how the membership is split in terms of the member journey, looking at the channels there, and notwithstanding, and I think it was one of the critical points in the chat earlier on, was that around how do we get to those members that are not digitally enabled? So what we do as an organization, we already have consultants that are sitting around the country, right, in satellite offices. We have the privileges, obviously, with the participating employers to have these consultants based there. Their core function is to engage the membership in those regions, right? They have been placed there looking at languages, specifically around English, and the second one being the predominant language of the respective region. So they are able to converse in both platforms, and we're moving in the direction of ensuring that you know, we have an understanding of where our broader memberships are sitting. So like if you look at ESCOM right now, you look at the power stations, they don't have the access to the technologies all the time, so we are unable to get to them. So right now, you know, just from a communication point of view, the reach, utilizing both the face-to-face, voice-to-member, and digital channels, we managed to get to approximately, you know, you can say about 19,000 members already, if I just look at the 40,000 active members that we have. And thus far, you know, looking at the physical engagements that have been handled, we got close to approximately 600 of those across the country already. So what does that communication entail? Then let's get there. First, it's unpacking that formula, right? Dissecting it and then jumping into two-pot, because once you jump into two-pot first, and as I indicated, being the stepchild, everybody understands two-pot from contributions point of view, right? We have to talk service and we have to talk salary, right? And then understand how that gets dissected into the various components itself. So it's critical to isolate the differences between defined benefit to defined contribution, get the calculation sorted out and the understanding around that, get the understanding of how the splits will happen from a pensionable service point of view, and then bringing back home to say this is how it will actually impact your benefits. So yes, a daunting task. And I think we gained momentum and success because of our experience in many years in the fund before two-pot came along, and I think COVID really triggered that for us. So we have all of those channels available, and alongside making sure that the face-to-face is critical. And I can assure you, the outcry right now, colleagues, around participating, the outcry right now is physical, not digital. Although many would disagree with me, people love to hear you stand in front of them and explain this thing in detail.
Sure.
Digital eliminates that warm body touch as such. Let me pause there for a second. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Joey. Monique, I'm glad you stayed on the call and persevered, because I did want to definitely ask Old Mutual this question. So welcome. I'm glad you sorted everything out there. We can see you beautifully. So in a recent poll I ran on the website, a lot of members kind of complained, or not complained, but submitted their views. A lot of industry stakeholders submitted their views that we don't segment our communication appropriately. In other words, we don't, address particularly younger members correctly. Has Old Mutual, and I mean, for those of you on the call who don't know, Old Mutual has a significant fund membership across umbrella funds, etc. So does Old Mutual specifically segment their communication efforts? Or kind of how have you gone about your communication strategy?
Yeah, so thanks very much, Natalie, and apologies for the delay. And good morning to everybody on the webinar today. So essentially, what we've done is we started sending communication quite early in last year already to try and prepare members, employers, and our intermediaries for this big change that was approaching. And we've seen readership rates actually starting to grow more towards this year. We're seeing people a lot more interested. In terms of segmentation, what we have done is when we produce communication, we're providing different examples to members so that they can see that we are not only, it's every different scenario we're trying to actually cover. So it talks to members who don't qualify. It talks to members who are going to be limited by the 30,000 Rand maximum. It talks to a member who's sitting with between the 2,000 and 30,000 as well in one communication, so that we can try and reach as many members as possible, but with a standard message. One of the questions on the chat earlier was, are we talking to members about what they qualify for? Do they know the implications of what they qualify for? And I wanted to address that piece as well, just to say that we have this a WhatsApp calculator, and when we produced that, we provided it via email, the link to it, and we provided it via WhatsApp as well. And the click-through rate from a WhatsApp perspective was almost 90% for the WhatsApp calculator. And we've had about 30% of our members engaging with that WhatsApp calculator already, which does, it is an authenticated calculator. It links through to data that sits within our database and actually gives the member a real life experience of what their values will look like post-tax as well. It gives them an idea of what that marginal tax would be, what their net value would be, so that a member actually has an understanding of what this thing looks like overall. And I think the feedback we've gotten back from that is that members actually are quite shocked at the tax that they're needing to pay and how little the net value is that they're going to get out. So those are some of the communication that we've done.
Wow. Guy, the next one's for you, and I'm hoping it doesn't make you too uncomfortable. So, I mean, Discovery and I guess the same for Alex Forbes, maybe NBC. Your websites and calculators all seem to be in English. Is there an ability to kind of ingest information into those systems that are not in English?
It's very difficult to do websites in multi-language, apart from what Google can kind of do for you. And especially something like a calculator, which is quite mostly doing the calculation. We're hoping that having it in English is valuable and serves a purpose. There's an interesting thing that hasn't been touched on a lot here, which I think is important in getting past the language and face-to-face, etc. barrier. And that is leveraging the natural network of HR personnel, employer kind of representatives through the country. And so I think that's actually where the best bang for buck can be spent at the moment, is making sure that those people don't have a cursory understanding, but really feel equipped with understanding two-part, because they are both trusted and known and know how to communicate with their people. And so I think that's really where not always, but very often you can do that in English. So that makes it kind of easier in terms of who can you deploy into those spaces to speak to those people. And then those people have such a crucial translation kind of role to do here in holding members' hands, both on the kind of practicalities, how should I do this? They're going to be asked for that, but in answering simple, basic first line questions for members and being able to direct them to where to go for various kind of queries or concerns.
Guy, thank you for that. You've actually segued into my next point. So you couldn't have set it up better. Thank you. Belinda, from an Alex Forbes point of view, what are you doing to equip your HR and payroll staff? Because as Guy very, very correctly points out, when I want to submit my claim on the 2nd of September, and I hope my HR people are listening, the first person I will go to is the payroll lady or the HR executive. What has Alex Forbes done kind of in that space?
100%, Natalie. And I think Guy has really touched on a key point there. HR is very important in this process. We also want to ensure that we educate HR around the changes. And from our perspective, we do have member education services, which is a key part of our strategy in engaging with HR and members on the ground. So we hold 3 sessions a month, and in English and then other languages as well. And to incorporate HR in those sessions, also to engage with them through our administration academies. So making sure that we can keep them informed of the processes, how we are doing things, basically from a DB perspective, from a DC perspective, and also ensuring that where they have a member that comes to their office, that they will be able to direct them appropriately to Alex Forbes, to either our advisors on site that are there to assist members and to take them through what their calculation looks like, what the implications are. So it is very important from our perspective that we have them on board. But additionally, it's also important that we don't overburden HR and make sure that we have a flow where they can direct the queries and information to. That doesn't then mean that it becomes this massive job on their side. So to support them, and again to make sure that from a communication perspective, that they do participate and get their members to participate, so that they're also ready essentially all together in terms of the discussions that they need to have before the 1st of September, and then also continue those after September.
Subedra, anything to add from NBC's perspective for us?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of HR and HR training, yeah, so we definitely do, a lot of HR training. So I think it's vital, so for the members, their first line of contact is with HR and payroll personnel. So we obviously do, general training, in terms of two parts, how does two parts work, the rules and, what does it mean for your benefits? And then, of course, specific training now in terms of claims. How do the claims work? What sort of information does payroll need to provide to the administrator, which is your banking details, tax information, ID information, etc. And then, of course, for a claim, then what information would the member need to provide, when they're actually making a claim as well. So I think that definitely do that, and I think it is very important. With regards to websites, yeah, so definitely videos and information is available in multiple languages. But I think again, as we mentioned, when it comes to various different languages, best form of contact and the best form of communication is in person, because really members want to engage. They don't want to be talked at or read something necessarily. They want to engage, so they want to ask a question. And when members do engage in their own language, I think that's where you see, that people do understand.
Monique, I'll give you the final word. From an all mutual point of view, you're on mute. Just note.
Thanks, Natalie. I'm assuming you can hear me. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you.
Okay, perfect. So I think we've realized that obviously the change management piece of this change in legislation is quite a big piece of the process. Everybody's been used to a way of doing things. So I see that there was a comment on the chat about, is the employer going to be involved in this two-pot or the savings withdrawal process? So yes, it will be member-led, but I think it's important that the employer also understands what the member experience is going to be, because there is an opportunity, particularly we heard a lot of concern around digital versus paper-based and so forth earlier. So it is going to be quite important for members or for employers to make place available for members to be digitally enabled. I think that's one of the key pieces of assistance that employers can give, and also to help manage some of the member expectations. So what we've looked at when we communicate with members is we've looked at what do we expect those pain points to be? Where do we expect members to struggle? And it is things like, how do we assist them from a digital enablement point of view? It is a member who's expecting a payout who doesn't necessarily qualify, or a member who's expecting a bigger payout than what they will be receiving. And we've tried to address communication from that point of view so that we could really dig into the real issues that members are going to be facing through this journey, including things like, do you understand that taking this amount has an impact on your retirement future? So I think it was really a sort of holistic view around how members are impacted, their employers, and obviously the intermediaries that deal with those members as well. How do we get them all ready? How do we manage this whole process? And it is, I think there's going to be a lot of learning that's going to happen after 1 September as well, because as much as we communicate, we also understand that, and somebody mentioned it in the chat earlier, people don't always read. So we have to try and demonstrate to them what that experience will be. What we've also done is webinars for employers, intermediaries, and members, and we're running those in different languages to try and reach as many people as possible. But attendance would be better if we could add a few zeros at the end of the attendance numbers. So I think there's going to be a lot of learning that'll happen in that first month. As much as we're trying to prepare, I think there's a lot that's going to happen after 1 September when the rubber really hits the road. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Monique. Okay, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I mean, I would love to sit with all 10 of you all day and unpack this and deal with all the eventualities, but we've run out of time. So without any further ado, I'm going to wrap up the session. I see that many of you, thanks Guy, thanks Natasha, thanks Sia, all of you who are interacting on the chat. A wonderful opportunity to interact with the industry on what's happening in this kind of readiness. I still have this picture in my mind of queues and queues of people on whatever street your main office or your HQ is on. But yeah, we will continue to interact. And I think as an industry, and just to let everybody in attendance know, this session was specifically focused on preparing for two-pot. We will hopefully run a session after two-pot has been implemented to kind of glean the lessons learned by the various administrators and stakeholders in implementing this, and particularly around education. I think that is key in our industry. So I'm going to thank the panelists who are still on stage while I wrap up. Thank you very much for your time. Please feel free to interact on the chat while it's still going. And thank you very much also to the guests, and for those of you who have attended this morning, thanks hugely to Old Mutual who have sponsored our event. What's going to happen after we conclude is you will be given a couple of handouts on the chat if you maybe want to read those for any help that you might need. And you'll be directed to the EBnet page, website page. Two things I'd love for you to do there. The first is to register for, or pre-register for, our next webinar, which is an executive encounter with Hendrik de Tooy, who, for those of you who don't know, he's the CEO of 91. And we really want to be engaging with him and investigating with him what it takes, or what it took for them to turn a South African asset manager into a global investment firm. And for those of you who don't know, they have 3 trillion rand in assets under management. I wouldn't even know how to write that number. Subedra, as an actuary, would have to help me with that. But yeah, so that's our next one. And if you're also inclined, please register for our newsletter every day, where we will be updating you and keeping you in touch and up to date with two-pot legislation and activities and processes as they unfold. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for the rest of the panel who's sitting in the audience, updating and answering the questions. I think I've hit everything. And further to that, best of luck to everybody for the first. And we'll keep engaging. And thank you very much for spending the hour with us this morning. Thank you.